Hey, good evening, everyone. Didn't plan on doing another recording today. This is Lowman02, but we got four more games that were kind of interesting. Two with Storm, one with Elves, and then one with 4CBlood. So this first game is against Dots, most recent champion of the Chainsaw Massacre, and he's on a Grixis build. Actually, we're both on Grixis build. However, he's on more of a Grixis control style deck, and we are on a Grixis Storm deck. So let's go over the keep real fast. Very strong keep. So with the rebuilds in the deck, I found our keeps have been just 10 times better. The removal of the Moxen was key to this. The Mox Diamond was junk, and just adding an additional land to the deck has really helped it out. And then removing the one basic mountain, which was just junky. You want black and blue mana in this, and then maybe like 1 to 2 red is enough to do everything you need to do with it. So looking at the keep, we have our Diabolic Intent, Snapcaster, and Tainted Pact. So this hand's very mutable. We don't really have great targets for Snapcaster, but he does. I mean, I guess we do have the Tainted Pact. That's on 4 mana, and we do have the Diabolic Intent, which we can sack the Snapcaster to utilize. So pretty powerful hand. Good lands. We keep it. We see the opponent play a Temple of Deceit, and then a Black Leaf Cliffs. So we're thinking like, you know, either Grixis mid-range or Grixis control. Probably control, because he's not doing anything. And we Tainted Pact at his end step. He 4 spikes it. Okay, cool. You'll kind of see a recurring theme. We force him to use his mana on his turn. If I'm not mistaken, this first game we do lose. He has a very, very strong permission. He has a hand that's very strong in permission. We're kind of hoping he's going to like tap out for some action, but he doesn't buy off on it. I mean, and I'm just thinking like his hand's just got to be chock full of counter spells. Obviously not discard though, which is good because I mean we've been able to at this point kind of protect our hand. With Thirst of Knowledge and at his end step, we get miscalced. Then we Snapcaster, cast Thirst on our turn. Ditch the Chrome Mox. It's too much card disadvantage. I mean, Lotus Petal is not great card advantage either, but it doesn't take 2 cards up to actually have an effect. So we kind of land out this game. He is on obviously a mana light draw. He's not trying a lot of lands. So go ahead and go for the Diabolic Intent. This gets countered. Memory lapsed. We Pact of Negation. He counters again with a counter spell. So yep, we're saucing a lot of counter magic least out of his hand. But our hand does nothing at this point. We're just on pure lands. We got the Diabolic Intent back from Memory Lapse, which is yuck. Then we see Jace come down, and Jace ends up pretty much winning the game for him here. Jace begins controlling our top deck after two draw 3s, which is kind of hard to resist with a flooded strand or fetch land on ground. That aside though, I think it may have been wiser for the opponents to start hitting our top deck. I don't know what's in his hand though. So you see a Tombstalker, he's got a great efficient threat and still has counter magic up at this point. So we'll pass it back. We'll attempt to repeal this thing on his upkeep to force him to tap down and not play more threats if he can't deal with it. If he can, he's not going to play any bigger threats. See it complicate. What are you going to do? We draw another brick there in Lab Maniac. We end up playing it out so we can Diabolic Intent it. And let's see what's going on with Chaos here. Sorry about that, folks. Give me un momento. We'll go back to the game. Yeah, we just get battered. We end up getting him. We lose our Lotus Petal and Rain of Filth. We draw a Candelabra for our turn. Expect that we're going to get one more draw step, but he attacks in. We're at 7, and we get electrolyzed. So we end up losing this one, and as you can see, he jaced our top deck twice, and Candelabra is dead without. Yeah, so we're talking to Chaos Black Doom here about some old legacy tech. I think he's looking for engineered explosives. And I guess he didn't know that Powder Keg used to actually be tech in Legacy, not for that long, and not. I'm trying to remember. So I think Eldrazi lists sometimes still use 1 or 2 Ratchet Bombs. Ratchet Bomb is the card that like kind of superseded Powder Kegs. Yeah. And yeah, we'll let him know. Ratchet Bomb. it's a fine removal card in colorless decks. And let's go to the second game. So the second game we end up taking. And this is a fine hand. You know, the one thing that it does it is limited on, it doesn't have any trips. What you take away is it charms. His hand's not great. It's not fast, and it has like one permission spell without that. We figure if we can get the Nightscape down off land off the top, then we can cast the deck. We knew the Dwarven Miner was in hand, or correction, no, we did not. He drew the Dwarven Miner, which is not great news for us. We get rid of the Labman and the Tendrils. We don't really need those in our hand. You know, if he ends up having a Relic of Progenitus, and we could be in some trouble. Actually, I don't know how we can win that, possibly. Um, but we have to ditch one, because right now, you know, our lands are going to be getting blown up every turn, and we really just need to get after mana sources. We get Dazed here. He's behind a land, but his hand really didn't do much. So we get Duress. We still have Snapcast, which is a very strong play. And really what we're using the DAC for is just to find mana and cards. We find the Defense Grid, which is an awesome pull. We actually pulled the Dissolve out of his hand at the Grave Titan. He's a mile away from casting the Grave Titan. He's just not hitting lands. I think he may be on like a land light build this deck, maybe like 36, 37 lands. I think in Grixis control, or Grixis, maybe this is mid-range more so. He's got cards like Dwarven Miner, which is probably in from the board. I don't actually think it's good against this deck, so we run 10 basics. You know, he can blow up our red lands, and actually, I think he blows up our red lands kind of under a false assumption. But not entirely, because we do need one red mana. One red mana is the critical component. Once we have the one red mana, like, and we can get the Past in Flames going, the blue and black mana is really where we want to be. So we just keep on getting Dust Bowl, not Dust Bowl, the Dwarven Miner into Oblivion, but he's not really doing anything, so it's okay. We hate getting rid of an island there, because obviously right at this point in time, basics are very strong for us. We're maintaining that rain and fill, because we know we're going to be on a land light hand. We end up playing this out. So we know we're going to want to sack the lands off to make more mana. He bolts that thing, yeah, whatever. Attacks Dak. The name of his game is getting rid of Dak, because Dak is just drawing us so many cards. So this is a great pull. So we end up hitting the Mana Flare. Leave back the Nightscape Familiar. It gets bounced by Jace. We're kind of like, eh. So we lose our hand. Keep in mind, like, I think by the end of this turn, we're like 55 cards deep. Yeah, so we're 57 deep. We do get very lucky and hit Frantic Search. I mean, if we hadn't, we're looking at 3 cards a turn. We ditch those, it's fine. Really, what we're using this for is to make mana. Cast the Past in Flames. He knows it's over. I mean, we have the Tendrils in the graveyard. We have Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Reign of Filth. You know, we can do a lot with this graveyard. And even on 2, we're gonna hit. I'm trying to think if we, Snapcaster, Stuff should come out. Peer Through Depths is gonna get something good. Gitaxian Probe's a free spell. Metamorphose is essentially a free spell. You know, although we're already hellbent, so like we don't know what we need to fix for. I mean, if we fix with that, we're gonna fix blue black, or blue black more than likely, or possibly blue. We're not likely. We may make we may make some red mana off this, but transmute it with Metamorphose. We've got the win here, though. He knows it. We know it. He doesn't want us to show it. We don't need to show it to him. He understands the deck well enough. Okay, so here, you know, again, a strong keep. We have our win kind of hand, which is like, you don't really generally want the Tendrils in hand. But it's fine. You know, it guarantees you're going to have at least the component you need to win the game, which means that our Peer Through Depths, our Augurs, and, you know, our draw cards can really look for us. So we have Flusterstorm, which is a board card, came in. And you saw a board card last game as well, which is Defense Grid against control-style decks. He tries to stifle us here, you know, essentially using it as a wasteland against our fetches. We fluster it, because this deck really needs its land, really badly. When it starts losing lands, it's very, very bad for it. Now we have a secondary active spell against him, or interactive spell rather, in the form of Pyroblast. We also have the Cabal Therapy. We haven't seen his hand yet, so we don't really know what's going on in there. And frankly, like, it's fine, because he's on 2 lands. He probably has a lot of counter spells. But the cool thing is because he's behind on board, he's only probably be able to cast 1 a turn. So we save the Cabal Therapy, kind of thinking, you know, the turn we're going to try to win, we're going to want to use that. I think we do discard it here, though. Yeah, because we were kind of planning on using the Augur to do that. He'd go for the Throats or Augur. I'm fine with that. It's cool. We opt, find our land. Great. Play it out. Tapped, pass it back. I believe we peer through depths, and he counters it. We Pyroblast back, because Peer Through Depths is a very powerful card. We find the Grim, we hit the Grim Tutor. We'll have the mana to cast it off Cabal Ritual. Cast the High Tide, making a whole boatload of mana. Cast Snapcaster, I believe snapping it back, recasting it, snapping it back again. Each time making mana, essentially. Cast the Visions of Beyond. End up tutoring for the Dark Ritual, or correction, the Dark Petition. Don't need to use it. We have the Lethal Storm, so we kind of stop there as opposed to continuing to cast spells. Plus, we're pretty low on mana, and that's the game. So good games against dots. You know, a little stormed if it could. Got there. So we played Bomber 6-6. A lot of folks who watch my stream regularly probably are familiar with this player. I met him on Magic Online. So he's on more of like probably a Canadian Highlander build. I know he has cards like Sol Ring, Demonic Tutor, and like Mind Twist in his deck. You know, he's playing an Orzhov, like disruptive, not really hate bears, but like he's got a lot of discard. It's like a very discard heavy deck. So a very strong denial theme. And as you'll see, I mean, and I believe one of the detriments that comes with like Canadian Highlanders, there's no boards in them. So he's playing like a lot of main cards that I would consider board cards. I believe turn 2 he actually plays a Chains of Mephistopheles, which is like a huge beating against Storm. It's not the worst. I mean, like the worst is probably that 3-1 that just allows you not to draw, period. Because Chains actually still does allow you to filter. So yeah, we see Chains come down and we're like, whoa, what the heck is he on? And that's an extremely disruptive card against this deck. It's great against this deck. And maybe it is that he plays Canadian Highlander against Storm decks on a regular basis, which I think they're definitely more viable there because you have power cards, points for power cards you can put inside the deck, like Black Lotuses and stuff like that, LEDs. So we're hitting our lands well. We end up playing on the Mana Flare because we kind of have a taste of his deck, and his deck doesn't seem like it's a deck that can like use the mana that well. It's just going to cast like Gurmag Anglers and like Blind Obediences. It's not going to win the game this turn, so you know we're like, let's give it to him, and he can cast whatever he wants with it. And we keep on breaking, unfortunately. Really, what we're looking for is tutors and tutors. Excuse me, folks. So anticipate great against Chains. We find the tutor we need in Dark Petition. And we've been keeping this Rain of Filth for quite some time to produce a ton of mana. Hopefully Moto didn't break here. Yep, there it goes. We end up taking the Petition, tapping down, playing the Pyretic Ritual, Rain and Filth. I believe we sack on our one island, Dark Petition. End up finding, if I'm not mistaken, the Past in Flames. Yeah. And they start casting nonsense out of the graveyard to generate a bunch of Storm. Really what the name of the game is, cast nonsense. And eventually recast Dark Petition off all the lands we just sacked. And that's the game. Second game leads me to believe he may not understand this deck, because he concedes in a place where he's actually going to win the game. I don't know why. So we look at his hand. He's got like Hymn to Turek, Sinkhole, Mesmeric Fiend, and then like some removal that doesn't matter to me. He hymns us. You know, him I win. Him is a rough card against this deck, folks. Really, we're looking for lands. So we see that. That's great. So he has Mesmeric Fiend, so like I want to be able to get his disruption. And what my thinking is if he casts it out here, Mesmeric Fiend is not like the Brain Maggot, so you can't Dark Blast in response. What my thinking is if he's Mesmeric Fiend, which he's not, which is good for him, we're gonna cast our Frantic Search and ditch the Dark Blast, and then redraw it on upkeep to take care of the Mesmeric Fiend. So we leave it in the graveyard. If you ever cast some Mesmeric Fiend, we'll get it with Dark Blast. Plus, Dark Blast is great regardless because it just generates a large graveyard. And we're like, yep, there's that Mesmeric Fiend. We go ahead and hold on to our Dark Blast. We want to draw a few more cards. We see this. This thing is a beating, but I think, unfortunately, he doesn't... I mean, he uses it well enough, but he hits the wrong spells with it. What was the second spell he hit? The second spell was Tainted Pact. He probably needed to hit the mana. But the funny thing is I guess he just overevaluates our ability to kill him with this hand. We're only going to hit him for 14 damage here. And then probably promptly lose. You know, I'm trying to think through alternate lines. Like, I mean, like, if he ever taps out, we can get him because if we hold the Dark Blast in hand, we can hit the Withered Witch, or the Withered Wretch, rather, on upkeep, and then redraw the Dark Blast to do -2/-2, or -1/-1 twice. But I don't think it's very likely he's going to tap out with a Withered Witch. I think, like, if this game goes on longer, I'm going to give it a shot and let him screw up. And actually, he does get, he does end up getting the Seething Song, which is right, and the Tainted Pact. But I think before, it's close. I think before Tainted Pact, you need to get the Dark Ritual, because, like, the mana, you're playing around my hand, which my hand is junk. Like, Force of Will is terrible here. And he knows my Tendrils, so I killed his Mirror Fiend with the Blast. You know, so I don't know why he concedes here, but he does. And that's this game. We play one more against Bomber 6-6. We've been talking to this player for a while. We're kind of hoping he'll join in the Chainsaw Massacre and you know, play with the community we have there. I think he's still a little too used to the rules for Canadian Highlander, where you have honestly a more powerful card pool available to you. So we're playing 4-color Blood right now. This is a German deck, if I'm not mistaken. And we ended up playing on a Bitter Blossom off of our Evanston's Pilgrim and Bayou. This deck is essentially a 4-color mid-range, aggro mid-range deck. It's just a beating. It's just efficient removal, efficient creatures, and then disruption is really the recipe for the deck. Well, I say efficient creatures and planeswalkers. Yeah, we start hitting his hand. We take the Grave Titan because everything else there's junk. If he wants to play out the Vampire, we'll sack a Rogue or Fairy Rogue. And if he wants to play out like his removal of my stuff, I go ahead. So I believe we see a Nightville Spectre. We've been kind of holding this Bolt in the hand for something like this. Again, very efficient removal. As soon as we bolt this, I believe he concedes the game. Yeah. Okay. So he concedes the game once we do that. You know, when you're casting Sinkhole into Bitter Blossom, I don't think that's where you want to be. Like that's not going to beat Bitter Blossom. Bitter Blossom is it's one of those cards. You know, if you can't get rid of it relatively rapidly, it's just going to take over the game. And really where it shines like against like control style decks. But here we're still able to apply a decent bit of other pressure as well as the Bitter Blossom. Like it does well for us. I believe we play out the Hissing Quagmire first, kind of setting up the Qasali Pride Mage on turn 2, or the Tidehollow Sculler. And I believe we end up with a Sculler, because we're kind of curious. What do you got in your hand, man? You know, that's kind of what we're thinking. And we see an Edict, Doomblade, Mind Twist, Smallpox, just a lot of removal nonsense. And I'm kind of thinking in my head, I'm like, wow, your draw against my Storm deck was great because like most of your cards are so dead against that matchup. We'll go ahead and Wasteland him. He just hit his second land again though. He Doomblades our Noble Hierarch. That cool. We're hitting lands like champs. So I mean, eventually we're gonna cast more threats out like the Qasali Pride Mage next turn run, and then we'll start pumping Throne or Qasali Pride Mage with Elspeth, etc. He plays out a Pack Rat. Fine card. You know, it's just not as fast. I mean, once it takes over a game, it's hard to turn it right back around outside of like Wrath of God effects. But when he's being presented with like, 4/4 regenerating hexproof plus, a guy who pumps stuff with 3/3 when he attacks alone, it's gonna be pretty tough. So I mean, we pump the Qasali Pride Mage with Elspeth because really what we don't want to do is allow him time to get value off his Nightvale Spectre, as well as his Pack Rat. Because Pack Rat after like 2 to 3 turns unanswered is just, it's game over. He plays on the Sin Collector. I think this probably should have come out. Like we're not really a spell heavy deck. We got a couple. Got a couple cards that are decent spells like Lightning Helix. The one that's a 2-for-1, the 2 damage and 1 damage. I think it's Arc Lightning or something like that. It's not Arc Lightning, but I can't remember the name of it. Lightning Bolts, Swords to Plowshare, stuff like that. But I mean, like for the most part, we're a creature and planeswalker based deck. So they've taken that one down. with 4-color blood. And then our last game is against Johnny Rogue, and we're on ElfBallAlluren, and he's actually on a blue deck, which is unlike Johnny. Normally he plays um, green pie decks of some variety. So we're on Elves. Wirewood Symbiote, great card. You'll see us have a couple misplays with it. I believe we just straight up like miss one. So the Wirewood gets out there. Wirewood's just great in this deck. It's just a beating. Unfortunately, we don't do it justice with a couple of our plays with it. We end up playing out the Evolutionary Leap. He's repping Counterspell strong, but I'm like, there's one way to get it out. I would have rather it been actual factual Counterspell as opposed to like Spell Pierce, because Spell Pierce just loses value against a lot of my deck. I hate to give him value off of that on a card that he can target with it. But obviously this hand, it's good. We're gonna be able to protect our Genesis Wave. So we could have bounced that thing in response to the Burst Lightning, and we probably should have. We did not, though. That's mistake number one with Wirewood Symbiote. Attacking again. Really, we're looking to set up is the Raphelos Landwar Emissary with Wirewood. We give him the beatdown pile and the Thing in the Ice and land pile. I don't think Thing in the Ice is very good against this deck. It can just cast so much of his stuff and make so much mana. The turn all of it comes into play that you're gonna be hard pressed to use that thing effectively against it. It's not like I'm playing one threat a turn. I can probably within another turn or so, I could probably play all this crap out at once again. Prof Bolt, second mistake. So we accidentally I don't know, the UI on Wirewood Symbiote got me. If you're using it, read over on the left-hand side. It tells you if you're tapping or untapping. Because it's a colon effect, the way it's written, it says return elf or return elf to its controller's hand or owner's hand, colon, untap and return elf. The way it's written like that, you would think you'd return first, but technically you untap. You target for untap first in Magic Online, because of the way the card's written with that colon in between both. So we end up playing out the Heritage Root. We have just a ton of mana. I believe we end up going for a Genesis Wave this turn. It kind of bites us in the butt because we end up ditching our I can't think right now, our Crater Hoof. We didn't put enough mana in it to get Crater Hoof, so we just get 1 mana. We do get a Fierce Empath, which allows us to get the Primeval Titan, which means that we have a pretty strong suspicion that our mana will be online unless we get Aven Mind Sensor or something. See a Steam Augury, kind of like a worse version of Fact or Fiction. He gets to make the piles, I choose him. We see a Standstill come out, and I'm thinking I don't think that's. I mean, it's not that great here. I don't think it's great here. I mean, he does have up right now, an Avacyn, which when I saw that, I figured I was gonna get Pyroclasm or something, but I don't know if he doesn't run sweepers or what. So we Wood Elves again. End up playing out the Coiling Oracle, drawing the Nissa, playing the Nissa, getting the Forest, flipping the Nissa, and then drawing another card. Wirewood Hive Master. And this card is just it's a good synergy card. You obviously it's not Lissalana. Lissalana is the better version of this because it makes Elves, which with the Heritage Root in play, can just make a boatload of mana. We end up pulling the last 6 drop out of our deck, and now the deck is just all Elf cards for the most part, or Elf creature cards for the most part. Of note, we are a Primeval Titan deck, but really what it circulates around is Acquisition of Deserted Temple plus Gaia's Cradle. We don't have the Dark Depths combo or anything silly like that in here. This is pretty pure and simple, just combo Elves. We play out the Primeval Titan expecting to get countered. He Aven Mind Sensors. We only get 1 Dryad Arbor as opposed to 2 lands. We go ahead and start producing mana, and really kind of what we're banking on now is that, Alluren's kind of dead. We're kind of hoping for a way to get vast card advantage over him at this point. We see Garruk on top. Garruk is an all-star in this deck. The deck is, I believe, 28 lands, and then just, basically all creatures and a couple very powerful green spells. Natural or I think tutor effects for creatures. We see Elspeth come out. I believe she makes some tokens. Taps down our Sky Shroud Elf. We do end up losing our draw engine, but we already have Garruk, which is a draw engine in and of itself. We do find the Eternal Witness, which we kind of wanted to look for with the Fauna Shaman, but it would have been very difficult with an active Aven Mind Sensor. At this point, we do have the mana off Heritage Druid to put Crater Hoof down. We do and swing in for negative 200 78 or something like that, I think. But we'll end up seeing here. Oh, well, folks, unfortunately, the game has broken. That's not what we did there. We cast the Eternal Witness and then swung in, tapped a few other guys, and then swung in for lethal damage. Unfortunately, I think I've told you before, Craterhoof tends to break games for some reason. I don't know why. That card breaks recordings in games quite often. Alright, so we're looking at a turn 2, slow hand, but turn 2 Wirewood, followed up by an Elvish Champion, and then we'll retain the Eternal Witness until we find something that's valuable to get back from the graveyard. I believe it ends up being land in this case. Choosing Monastery Mentor, that's a card that's very close to being capable of growing at the same rate that this Elf deck is. I'm just kind of hoping his top deck's, it's junk. You know, I don't know what his counterspell package is. Like, it's kind of interesting to me because I believe in this game, like, we've seen very little counter magic. In the last game, I felt like we were getting countered, on a pretty regular basis. But so we nailed the Azorius Signet with the Viridian Corruptor. So we start trying to cast out our Wirewood Hive, our Herald here. And it's funny to me because this card ends up getting remanded here, which is fine. And then it also gets countered the following turn we attempt to play it again. So what's going through my mind right now is, like, he's on a Wrath and he's hedging against this card. Because this card, like, you don't want to Wrath this card. Because, I mean, it's going to go get, like, a Zuri or just something dumb, some dumb elf. Or, if we hadn't already done it, like, Fierce Empath or Elvish Harbinger. Fierce Empath, obviously allowing you to jump outside of elf tutor effects and actually tutor for, like, Craterhoof Behemoth and win the game. So we go for it here. He is blown up for Counterflux, but he does have the Spell Pierce as well. We get had by a Spell Pierce. That's fine. We always sack as an insect, which is, like, not high value anyways. Cast Multani's Acolyte out here, draw a card, make another insect. Find another blue-green land. And this point in time, we're, like, holding the Concord and Crossroads, as well as the Alluren, because we don't want to cast those down and allow the opponent to get value off of them. We'll cast them likely because we're at the count on lands that we are right now. The turn we need to use them to win the game. Mana is not a constraint right now. And I think in a top deck battle, I think his general power level of card is likely higher, but I think we're more favored to draw gas just because of how land light we are. Finds a Kitchen Finks off Chandra, ends up casting it out. Gains a bit of life. And I believe on this turn we end up casting the Alluren out. And he has no answer to it. And our expectation is to hold up the Priest Titania so that on the following turn we have a boatload of mana. But really, what we're banking on is to draw, like, one of our powerful. The 6-mana Garruk would be great. Primeval Titan would be fine. Craterhoof would be fine. We can cast every card in the deck at this point with the mana we have available. We end up getting Prof bolted on the Wirewood Hive Master. We cast out the what is this thing called? Priest Titania? Yeah, because we cast it out now just so we can get the extra 1/1 out of the exchange. Attacks him with a 2/2. For a short time to think about blocking it with my insects, and I say, hey, it's 2 damage. He's not going to pump it, until it can do like 16 damage. We go ahead and play out the Elvish Visionary, find the Garruk Color Beast. We figure we'd encounter, but no, it's a Steam Augury. We give him the smaller pile. I believe it's like a Torrent Gearhulk and like a land or something like that. Yeah, and then Banishing Light, negate in the other pile. So we look on our top, we end up finding the Elvish Archdruid plus Twinen's Elite, which makes makes a 4/4 and a 2/2. So what our trick is here is we're just going to use Gem Palm Incinerator and make all of our guys +2/+2 or just bigger, and that closes that game out. And then in game 2, nope, actually we've already gotten through this game. Well, folks, that exhausts our games that we have available today to show you. I hope you enjoyed all the decks we chose. And if this is a format that interests you, I really do hope that you'll pursue it some more. There's a little bit of reading out there on singleton formats, specifically the Chainsaw Massacre format. But if it is something that interests you and you decide that one of these decks is something like take for a spin, let me know. I can send you the list, or I can post it somewhere where you can easily assess it. Or you can go your own road and just build a deck, which I think this format is great for. I don't think there are certain archetypes that are better than others. I will give them that, but there's no definitive deck. If I were to say there's a definitive deck in this format, it'd probably be red deck wins, just due to the depth of cards available to it, and it's fairly consistent results for generally an unpunishing build. When you look at something like Storm, like that can be very punishing if not played correctly. It's very sensitive. It needs to be played pretty tight. And really, I think if Red Deck Wins wants to be at the top levels, it does as well. But my point, going back to my original point, is that there's a lot of viable builds out there. The format itself is great. It's a builder's format. It also rewards a high level of play because you're playing with singleton copies of all the cards, which means that when you're expending your resources, like depending on what kind of deck you're playing, if you're playing a recursive deck, kind of like my Storm deck or like my Rexer deck, then maybe you'll see them again. But for the most part, you're expending resources, and it's a resource that you're not going to get back. So part of that, you compensate with in build and finding redundancy or redundant effects from different cards, and or you build in a way to mitigate that. And then you also have to play tight because you're only going to get that effect or those kind of effects, some certain effects once. So great format. And if it does interest you, please join us for the Chainsaw Massacre. It's held every Saturday at 3:30 or 15:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can register for the event on gatherling.com. I say again, gatherling.com. Our ever faithful host is ML Berlin. Many of the players you see me playing, Dots, Bomber, J Rogue, Chaos Black Doom, the Sensei, um, Sugar Daddy, like, all good folks. Sung, if you see him on, just and you have a deck that you can play in 100 Card Singleton, according to the format, which is spelled out on gatherling.com under Chainsaw Massacre, then you can probably hit any of these folks up or do a buddy ad and offer or request a game with them, and I'm sure any of them, if they're not like in the middle of a tournament or something, would gladly give you a game. So very great format. I think it is a very skill building format for players, and I think it's just great fun in general as well. So I hope you enjoyed these quick videos of a couple different matches, and take care.